I was away last week, and I came home to what I felt like was a great betrayal. My wife had turned the air conditioning on in the house before the beginning. She's in the back, that's why. And we're working through it. I'm trusting for reconciliation. Let me ask you a question as I get set up here. How do you get to a place when you've never been there before? It's kind of an odd question, but let's imagine if I dropped you in an unfamiliar city. No phone, no GPS, no maps. What would you do? How would you get around? How would you find your way? Well, maybe you would look for some landmarks. Maybe you would ask someone for directions. Maybe you would find a nice person who is actually not just willing to give you directions, but willing to guide you to where you were trying to go. You know, life is kind of similar to that, in that we're all trying to navigate through all of these situations that we've never been to before. I mean, everyone sitting in this room can say honestly, I have never been this age before this morning. And so how do we figure those things out? The life decisions, the things that impact our future, that impact our relationships, big questions about how do we end up in happiness. And just like finding your way through an unfamiliar city, we need guidance to live well. Today, we are starting a sermon series in the book of Proverbs. Easter was so late this year that we are jumping into our summer series kind of right after, and we're going to pick up season 2 of Acts as we move into the fall. Proverbs, though, is a very different book from any other book in the Bible. It's not a chronological story that just kind of says this happens, then this happens, then this happens. There's no linear outline to follow. It's not even like blocks of poems like the Psalms. It's a collection of stories and sayings that are meant to make sense of the world. And so what will happen is that sometimes it'll explore a topic in a half of a chapter over several verses. Sometimes it will just machine gun through ideas, verse after verse after verse after verse, and you will barely be able to catch your breath. Now, because these ideas are found throughout the book of Proverbs, because there's not a chapter on wisdom or a chapter on relationships, what we're going to do is we're going to move around in Proverbs throughout this series as we look at 12 major topics that the book focuses on. Now, we've also put together something for you to help you. We've put together a reading guide. There's a whole bunch out there. They're also available online. There's an online reading that you can do every day. And it gives you just a simple reading plan that you can walk through the entire book of Proverbs in 60 days as we also walk through the book of Proverbs kind of from a different angle. And we think that with the reading guide and our time together here, and Lord willing, if you're in a growth group, that we'll come at this from multiple angles, and it will help us get the most out of our time in Proverbs. Now, if you've been around the Bible, maybe you've tried to read Proverbs, and maybe you've been overwhelmed, or maybe you haven't been around the Bible very much, and kind of everything I've said, maybe most of it's gone over your head. Let me give you a simpler explanation of the way to look at the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 1:8 says this: "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching." Here is a simple way to look at the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is specifically a conversation between a wise father and his son. And his son has a lot of choices before him. He has a lot of decisions to make, and the father wants his son to hear the wisdom that comes from his parents. It's focused on daily situations. What happens when you meet a certain kind of person? How do you spend your money in the right way? How do you schedule your time? How do you deal with a boss that is cruel? How do you deal with someone that the power differential in your interaction with them is wildly different? All of those kind of daily things. But it doesn't also ignore the deeper stuff that's going on. The father's main desire is that his son would live well in the world that God created. He says it like this in Proverbs 3, "My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity." He says, look, I have wisdom that I want to give you. I have a way of living that I am offering to you. But one of the first things that we have to see is that living well is not automatic. It's not just something that we stumble into living well. A few verses later in chapter 3, he says this, "Do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord, and shun evil." He's telling him, look, there is this default that you say, I'll be fine, I'll make it, I can do it on my own. And he says, look, that's not the way to go. He says, you have to learn how to navigate around the obstacles. There are going to be dangers in your life, some dangers that you set for yourself. And Proverbs wants to give you a way of knowing how to see those obstacles, of knowing how to make the better choices, of understanding what are the most important things in life, how to find the best route through any obstacle. In our home, we, especially Delia and I, we get on these reality TV kicks. So we, for a while, were watching and they're wildly separate. I mean, they're not like one genre. So for a while, we were watching the British Bake Off. And we were also, a little bit before that, watching the TV show Alone. They're about as far as you can get in terms of reality TV. Alone is the show where they take a contestant, a whole bunch of them, and they drop them by themselves in these incredibly wild and terrifying places, and they have to survive on their own. But what's so interesting is that each of them gets a certain amount of equipment that they're allowed to take. And so in our house for a while, we were playing this game of what would you take? And so somebody say, okay, if you were on a deserted tropical island, what would you take with you? And you might say a fishing net. You might say, I don't know, a way to break open coconuts. You would kind of think through it. Or what if you had to survive in a frigid mountain? And you say, well, I would take a big axe. Maybe I would take a saw. It changes. But kind of as we played the game and as you watch the show, the one thing, no matter where you are, they say, you know what you need? You need to have a way to make fire. There are some things that are simply universal. That no matter the situation you find yourself in, if you want to survive, you need this. Life is not a game like that, is it though? And living well isn't automatic. And in fact, we know people, we probably grieve over people that are living miserable lives right now. They've made terrible decisions or things have been dropped on them that are heartbreaking. And nobody wants that for themselves. Nobody wants that for someone they love, do you? No. Proverbs warns us that there's a way that appears right, but in the end, it leads to death. And so the book of Proverbs, what it's going to do is it's going to offer us tools. It says if you learn these tools, you can be dropped into any circumstance. You come into some money that you weren't expecting and you don't want it to ruin your family. You were accused of something that you didn't do and you don't know what to say. You feel overwhelmed at work. You feel betrayed by a friend. You feel stuck in a situation that will not change. Any situation, Proverbs says. And with the tools that this book gives you, it will help you find your way through. So then what's that one tool that you have to take with you everywhere you go? What's one resource that is more essential than any other? Proverbs says that it's wisdom. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. For wisdom is so important that it becomes a character in the story. As you read Proverbs, hopefully over these next 60 days, you'll see that wisdom is personified. And in our guide, we call her Sophia. And Proverbs says this, blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. For Sophia is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. If we want a good life, if we want to figure out what's the best way forward, what's the best route that you can take, wisdom leads us down the better route. Wisdom allows you to live in these varying situations and respond and know what to do. What happens when someone tells you something and you're not sure if you should believe it or not? Wisdom speaks to that in Proverbs. What about caring for your kids and raising them in the right way? Wisdom speaks to that. What about dealing with a stubborn neighbor who seems to be frustrating you, or somebody who you're kind of at odds with, and you just want to go and you want to grab one person and tell them about how frustrating they are? Wisdom teaches us a better way. What about finding the right spouse, the right partner in life? Wisdom helps us understand those things. It helps us to know how we spend our money, how we work. It gives us guidance for all these various things that you're going to find in your life. It helps you to know how to live in such a way that when you get to the end of your days, you have more to celebrate than you do to grieve. And we've all been to those two kinds of funerals, haven't we? Of someone whose life was not lived in wisdom. And relationships are broken. And there's destruction and hurt and grief and anger and bitterness, and children won't sit next to each other because they're still fighting. And we've also been to a funeral where wisdom has been lived out in someone's home. And people care for each other. They love each other. The right steps have been taken. helps us live in such a way that we know how to do the right thing. Now, we might immediately follow up and say then, well, how do I actually get wisdom? Where do I start? Do I have to enroll in a certain school? Do I need a certain degree in order to become wise? Do I have to go to a special place? Is wisdom only found in one area and they kind of hand it to you and it's this kind of secret fire that you're supposed to keep? The answer is absolutely not that complicated. Praise God. But it's also not simple either. See, because wisdom is more than just a collection of facts. It's more than just Wikipedia entries. It's more than just a set of rules. Wisdom is more than simply saying, you know, wake up and brush your teeth and exercise and everything will be fine. Wisdom is the ability to make the right decision in the right situation. Regardless of the outcome sometimes. Now listen, wisdom isn't forced on any of us. You don't have to pick up wisdom. You don't have to. There are other options for you. You can say, no, I'm good, I'm fine, I've got this, I'll be all right. And the book of Proverbs, it talks about people. It has characters in it who say, you know what, I don't need wisdom. Now, they're not going to be flattering, but there are two. Proverbs talks about the fool, and it talks about the scoffer. The fool is someone who doesn't like to be corrected. Let me ask you, is it better for you to save face and not look silly? Even if you end up kind of suffering the consequences rather than asking for help? Are you more worried about looking good than admitting that you're in over your head? Those are characteristics of the fool. And that might be where some of you kind of tend to go. I'm not trying to be mean or cruel, but that's just the language that Proverbs uses for someone who sees the world and says, I'll be fine. I just don't know what to do, but I'm not going to ask for help. Maybe it's said in this generic way. They say, you know what? I don't know if anybody else has any help. So we might say, look, if you're not only kind of seeking the truth for yourself, but if you're saying to other people, there is no truth. Every truth is as equal to every other truth. Then Proverbs would say, you are tragically in danger of living a life that at the end of your days, people will grieve. That's the fool. There's actually something worse than ending up a fool. It's ending up what Proverbs calls a scoffer. The scoffer, she trusts herself. She thinks that she doesn't need anyone. In fact, she thinks that everyone else that she runs into that does something differently than her is an idiot. Let me ask you, let's just be honest, friends. How many idiots do you meet during the day? There is that temptation, right? That you meet one idiot, that's just the thing. But if everyone around you is always wrong and you know that you're smarter and that you understand everything better than everyone, then maybe you're in danger of being a scoffer. See, a fool is someone who doesn't know, but who can learn. A scoffer is someone who is wise in their own eyes and refuses to learn. Proverbs 26 says this, "Do you see a person who is wise in their own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for them." A fool is at least maybe open to the idea that they're wrong, where a scoffer is locked in on their wrongness. So then actually, where do we go if we don't want to be a fool? Where do we go? Where do we start if we don't want to be a scoffer? How do we begin to find wisdom? Well, let me ask you, have you ever known someone who did great in school and yet they really kind of struggled in their career? Did you ever know someone who was very personable, good at flirting, terrible at relationships? We all understand that there's kind of a daily life, and you can be good at certain things in your daily life, and yet your deeper life can be a mess. It can look like everything's fine at first, but deep down, even a success in your daily life ends up feeling hollow if there's not something deeper going on. And so the start of wisdom is deeper. It's a deep thing. Proverbs 1:7 says this, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction." It's that idea of the fear of the Lord. And what is the fear of the Lord? That's such an alien concept, and that's a word we don't throw around normally. We could think of it as just meaning being scared. Have you ever thought about the fact that when you're dealing with little kids, there's this weird tension with them that sometimes if you're taking care of a child, they're too scared of certain things, and you are actively trying to get them over their fear of certain things. No, honey, the toilet is not going to eat you. Look, if you push it, it won't attack, I promise. But at the same time, in other situations, right, we want to make sure that they are scared of a situation, like when a child runs out into a parking lot and no one can see them. When Gabe was little, he had that problem. He would run, and one time he ran out, and Joanna was holding his hand, and it dislocated his shoulder. The doctor very graciously said, "I'd rather have to put it in your shoulder a lot more times than have to deal with a car injury, Joanna." But isn't that weird that sometimes we're trying to talk them out of being scared, and sometimes we're actually talking them into being scared? So fear is not necessarily a negative, but I think there's a lot more that can be said. It's not a bad thing, but it's incomplete. So, for instance, in Proverbs 16, it says this, "Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided." And so it gives us that, okay, the fear of the Lord helps you avoid evil. It helps you avoid the wrong way of living. That's a good one. Okay, that helps us. It also links fearing God and keeping the commandments. In more than one place, actually, Proverbs links humility to the fear of the Lord. And It says in Psalm 25, I understand it's not in the Proverbs, but it still uses that word, fear of the Lord. It says that it's meant to lead to friendship with God. The fear of the Lord leads to friendship with God. Meaning it's not something that's meant to push us away from God. It's actually meant to be something that draws us near to him. And then in Proverbs 9:10, it says this. It says, actually, the fear of the Lord is associated with knowing God. As you read Proverbs, you're going to come across three main verses, kind of the format. And ready? One of them is going to be a this, not that. Do this, not that. One of them is going to be a deeper verse. It's going to say something on the surface, and then it's going to say a deeper meaning. Another kind of verse that you're going to find is when there's kind of it's like a math equation where there's an equal in the middle. This is one of those. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's one side of the equation. Equals knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. So that, so the fear of the Lord helps us actually know God. So this is actually a really good thing. Maybe what we could say is that wisdom starts with knowing God and knowing yourself. We could think about it like this, kind of having a proper assessment of the cosmic situation of an infinite and good God and flawed people. Flawed people who have the scars and the mistakes that we've made, and who are still prone to all kinds of old problems and new ones. Now notice, it doesn't say that the beginning of wisdom anywhere is found in pride. It isn't found in pretending like you know what you're supposed to be doing. So much of our life, like a number of years ago, this phrase kind of came into the culture of adulting. This idea that young people, they would get out of high school, they would get out of college, and they wouldn't know what they were supposed to be doing, and so they would try to kind of pretend at it. They would go adulting. They would just kind of do this. I guess this is what I am supposed to be doing. And they thought that by the time you were out of your early 20s, you would know exactly what you were supposed to do as an adult. Are there those of you in your 30s who still feel like you're trying to figure it out? Are there those of you in your 40s who feel like you're still trying to figure it out? How about your 50s? How about your 60s? How about your 70s? How about your 80s? How about your 90s? It's not about saying, I have arrived. It's about saying, I need help. That's the starting point of wisdom. The beginning of wisdom is really the end of ego. It's not about your performance. Now, maybe you might hear me say all these things, and you might say, Sam, that's kind of a stretch. I don't know exactly where you're getting that from, except for Jesus says the same thing about finding your life and being willing to humble yourself. He says in Matthew 16, for whoever wants to save their life, they're going to have to lose it. And whoever loses their life for him are going to find it. See, on a street level, wisdom, on that kind of surface, wisdom helps you solve problems. It really does. It helps you figure out how to relate to people, how to say the right thing or not say the wrong thing. It helps you figure out the ways that you should interact with friends or with people that you really don't like. It helps you understand and see obstacles in front of you, and rather than just crash into them, learn not to crash into them, learn to avoid them. It helps you do all of those things. But at a deeper level, wisdom shows us that we have a very big problem. If you wanted one passage to put on your mirror, to memorize, to underline in your Bible from this week, it would be Proverbs 16:6. If you have your Bible, open up to Proverbs 16:6. Not everybody does, but this is what Proverbs 16:6 says. Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the Lord, evil is avoided. This one verse gives us, honestly, like the whole picture of the Christian life. But it's not through your love and through your faithfulness that your sin is atoned for. It's God's love and God's faithfulness that atones for your sin. And if you want to find a better route in life, then you're going to need wisdom to guide you. And if you want to find wisdom, you're going to have to start with God. And if you want to meet with God, you need to understand the love of Jesus Christ. Romans 5:8 says this: God demonstrated his love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so Proverbs offers this amazing thing, that on the one hand, there's all these helpful things that will guide us and lead us, but there's also this deeper connection that we can find into a life with God. And once we can comprehend how much God has actually done for us, then we can figure out how to find a better route forward. That's what we're going to do in this whole series. Next week, we are going to look at what Proverbs says about work. Did you know that if you work a 40-hour work week, and I know that there are some of you right now saying, I wish I only worked a 40-hour work week, that you will, in the course of your life, work over 90,000 hours. 10 years of your life spent in the context of your job. Proverbs has a ton to say about it, and I'm really excited to jump into that next week. Let's pray.